India has been truly helpful. We thank India for that, and we thank Colonel Shergill for that very informative presentation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue and now move on to the next presenter. He is Brigadier General, retired, Dr. Russell Howard from the United States of America. Brigadier General Russell Howard is President of Howard's Global Solutions and an adjunct professor at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. He is also a senior fellow at Joint Special Operations University and senior mentor for Development Alternatives Incorporated and senior advisor for the Singapore Home Team Academy and on the board of advisors for Laser Shot Incorporated. Previously, General Howard was the director of the Jebsen Center for Counterterrorism Studies at the Fletcher School and head of the Department of Social Sciences and the founding director of the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point, USA. Prior to going to West Point, General Howard was an Army Chief of Staff Fellow at the Center for International Affairs at Harvard University and commander of the 1st Special Forces Group Airborne at Fort Louis, Washington, D.C. Other assignments include assistant to the Special Representative to the Secretary General during UNOSOM II in Somalia, Deputy Chief of Staff for 1st Corps, and Chief of Staff and Deputy Commander for the Combined Joint Task Force, Haiti, Haitian Advisory Group. General Howard holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Management from St. John's State University, a Bachelor of Arts in Asian Studies from the University of Maryland, a Master of Arts degree in International Management from the Monterey Institute of International Studies, and a Masters of Public Administration degree from Harvard University. It's a good day today because it's his birthday. And ladies and gentlemen, he is ready to celebrate and you are in for a treat. But that treat is on civil-military cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brigadier Russell D. Howard from the United States of America. Sir, happy birthday.
It's good to be here. I hope you don't mind, but I don't like a podium. I like to work the crowd. I like to see who I'm talking to. 你听得懂我说的话？听得懂吗？好极了。中国话。The whole presentation in Chinese? It would be very difficult. 太难，太难。It's good to be here. I have some comments that I have to make before I begin my presentation. First of all, my comments are my own. I am a retired officer, a civilian. I do not speak for my government. I do not speak for the United States Army. Okay? It's good to be back in Sri Lanka. I was here 28 years ago. I was a major. I was taller. I was thinner. In fact, I was lean and mean. Now my wife says, you are just mean. I used to be a barrel-chested commando, sort of like this guy here, barrel-chested commando. Now my barrel has slipped in retirement. It's a pleasure to be here in time of peace. The last time I was here in 1984, it was during a time of difficulty. I'm going to talk about three things today. Next slide, please. Next slide. That's a good Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Next slide. I have some thanks to give. In the introduction, it was mentioned that I'm a senior advisor to DAI, Development Alternatives Incorporated. They're the ones that have taught me about development. I'm a special forces guy, not a developer, but in 4 years for working with DAI, I've learned about development. They are an institution here in this country, working for USAID. Next slide, please. No, next slide back. There you go. And thanks to Eva Chung. Eva is one of my research assistants at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. If you like my presentation, she gets all the credit. If you don't like my presentation, I am responsible and accountable. Next slide. It could not be a military-style briefing without an agenda, and this is my agenda. Learning from past failures. Now, talking about Sri Lankan reconstruction background is kind of redundant, since you've heard presentations today about this topic. So me speaking about it very much, I only dwell on it just a little bit. So first I'm going to talk about failures, talk about some important statistics, and I'm going to talk about learning from past successes. And the past success I talk about may surprise you. May surprise you, because it's historical in nature and deals with my country, not a country in the developing world. And some final thoughts. Next slide. I had a similar situation in Somalia to Reconstruction, only it was a precursor to Reconstruction. I was engaged in the demining, disarmament, and demobilization program in Somalia after Black Hawk Down. Next slide. Our program failed for several reasons. These are articulated. Unlike in Sri Lanka, where stability was achieved 3 years ago, stability was not achieved. We did not treat clans equally. We disarmed some clans. We didn't disarm other clans, which made it extraordinarily difficult. And some of you who have been or were in Somalia, you know the problems we faced. The demining learning curve, and I'm very impressed actually by the demining progress that's been made in Sri Lanka. Demining is very, very difficult work. I was engaged in demining operations in Somalia, also responsible for demining program in Cambodia, and an unexploded ordnance program in Laos. So I can tell you from personal experience, demining is very complicated, tough work. So from my perspective, what's been achieved here is somewhat remarkable. And we offered few alternatives in Somalia for clans or anyone within a clan or working for a warlord. We offered no real economic alternative. Next slide. You know the situation in Somalia. We had one possible success, and that was with the Sibari's National Police. It was the only organization in Somalia that had a national focus, that put themselves up above their clan or their tribe. When I was there, we asked them to assemble. Over shortwave radio, we asked them to assemble at certain points in Somalia, and they came. In their little battered uniforms, the Tyrolean hats that the Italians gave them, no weapons, sticks, but they came. And we trained them, gave them vehicles, weapons, and then, unfortunately, the United States, my country, decided to leave Somalia in the middle of a training program. I often think that had we stayed and we had completed the training of this national, next slide please, of the national police force, that Somalia might be a very different place now. These are old pictures of me. Next slide. The Sri Lankan experience is different than Somalia. I only use Somalia as my personal experience, and that it was a failure. It was a failure. The Sri Lankan experience is different for these reasons. Demining, as we've learned today, is considered a success. I've heard various statistics, only 2% left. I mean, it really is remarkable. Next slide. Still, I don't think there's any way to not consider the problem serious. The problem that Sri Lanka faced serious. Compounded by the tsunami, that this pictorial slide doesn't, to me, it doesn't, it's perhaps not correct. And then it doesn't show the North as affected as much by the tsunami. But I have read otherwise. You probably know better than I do. I've heard different statistics about the number of persons displaced, 430,000, 280,000, still a great number of people. So I don't want to take away from the complexity of the Sri Lankan situation. Next slide. There is some good news here, I think. Some good news. If the median income is GDP per capita of $5,600 a year, that's pretty good. Literacy rate, 90.7%. I'm not too sure in the U.S. it's more than 96%. So this has to be good. Has to be good. UNDP Human Development Index, 97th out of 187 countries. I do a lot of work in West Africa. They wish that those countries could have this situation. Next slide. 22% economic growth in the north. I think you've heard that figure twice today. 6.2% growth across Sri Lanka, 8% growth in 2010, 7.5% growth. You know what the growth is in the United States? This year, 1.2%. My president would love to have these figures. He would love to have these figures. Unemployment rate, 4.2%. In the United States, it's 8.3%. My president would love to have that figure. So success. Diaspora funds, 23%, 23.6% increase in 2010. I'm a little confused by this figure. I take it that diaspora funds have changed a bit, and maybe they're more positive now than they were before. I'll ask you, sir, maybe to correct that or tell me what about that figure. Next slide. Holy cow. My alarm's going off. So this figure of 430,000 people displaced, some bad news. 23% of the population lives below $1.25 a day. Now that's what I've heard. But it seems to me if the median income is $5,260, then this figure could not be correct. Could not be correct. This is an important figure. And it's what I'm going to dwell on in my conversation today. Youth unemployment rate of 21.3%. If that's true, that's a problem. And I'll explain why. And a better slide, next slide please. I think I have a better slide. Most of you know, and my presentation is not about demographics, but demographics are important. If you look at world trends in population, who can tell me today, this is for a steak dinner, who can tell me today what the population in the world is? What is the population in the world today? First person to tell me, I will buy a steak dinner. No takers? Yes, sir. How many? 7,200,000,000. 223,122. Who's going to argue with that figure? I was so impressed by our first speaker today. Our first speaker today, if you'll notice, he carried every number down to the last digit. And if he used only two numbers, he always had a point something. Point, a percentage point. He knows that if you remember nothing from my speech today, remember this. Always take a figure out to the last digit, and no one will ever argue with you. If you use only two digits, if you say 92, always say point something, and no one will ever argue with you. But sir, if you say 7 billion, then someone's always in the back of the room going to say, no, no. But I owe someone a steak dinner over here. I'll pay too. The problem with world population growth, 7 billion now. 2025, 9 billion. 2050, 13 billion. And then it starts coming down. Why? I'm not sure. But between now and 2050, we have some serious problems, both in the developing and the developed world. In the developing world, look at the number. The developing world that has the most youth, we call youth bulge, and lack of employment opportunities, and the developed world, aging populations with not enough youth to pay for Social Security benefits, for... Next slide, please. I'll show you. I'm not going to concentrate on the developed world. That's not today's talk. But in the youth glut in the developing world is very important. Very important. Because unemployed youth, if there's any policemen in this, any policemen in here, raise your hand. Any policemen? If you ask any policeman what is most troubling to him, it will be unemployed youth. Because why? Because they have nothing positive to do, and they only get in trouble. Only get in trouble. So, some states, more than 60% of the population is under the age of 29. I don't know what the situation is in Sri Lanka, but my guess is you might have a youth bulge problem here. I'm only guessing. Certainly in Pakistan, sir, we have a problem. So where are the jobs for youth bulge? And what will the youth do without jobs? Next slide. There are some criticisms. Today we've heard very positive presentations about the Sri Lankan experience. We've also heard from our Indian friend and a couple other questions that Sri Lanka has perhaps a bit of an image problem internationally. These quotations are taken from reputable papers, Washington Post, New York Times, others. I don't know if these are true or not, but this, today we've heard what the pictures portray. Military services helping people. Some in the media project a different image, and the image as I've depicted here. I make no judgment. I make no judgment. But I will say that I think Sri Lanka has a strategic communication challenge. Strategic communication challenge to tell the rest of the world or convince the rest of the world about what I've heard here today. And I might not be the right audience. I might not be the right audience. Next slide. So, My presentation today was supposed to be about learning from the past to project the future. So I'm going to talk about a situation in my country. And I came upon this particular topic one day in the forest in Oregon, walking with my dog. I have a vacation home in Oregon, and I happen to walk my dog a lot in the forest, and I was walking along and actually thinking about what I was going to say today. And I got tired. My dog's old now. I'm old now. We get tired. And so I sat down on a bridge. You know what a bridge? Small bridge, small road, over a stream. I sat down on this bridge, and I looked, and there was a plaque. It said, built by the CCC, 1936. And it just hit me that the CCC, or Civilian Conservation Corps, in my country was the largest civil military operation perhaps in the world of all time. Many in this room have never heard of it. Even young American officers, when I asked them about it today, they had not heard of it. But it was a major factor in construction in my country during the Great Depression. It is the most popular public service project ever in my country. But few now remember it or understand what it was. So I thought it might be informative for the next 10 minutes to explain to you what this public service project, the CCC, achieved. More importantly, for this audience, it was run by the United States Army. In total, run by the United States Army. Non-lethal, no weapons, run by the Army. Next slide. This was the logo of the CCC. This is just sort of a general overview. Every CCC, the ages were from 17 to first 23 and then 25. They earned $30 a month. These are $1942, though. And interestingly, the CCC workers, they wore uniforms, lived in barracks, lived military style, had formations every morning. They made $30 a month. They got 5. The other 25 went to their families. So money was infused into the system. Okay? All of their meals, everything was, requirements were provided for. What did it achieve? Well, strategically, the participants in this program, 2.5 million of them over a 10-year period, learned about their country, got to appreciate the United States Army in a very, very positive way. Positive way. And they did great service, construction service for the United States. Next slide. Just some items. Planted 3 billion trees, constructed 800 parks, updated forest fire methods, built a network of service buildings. Most of the buildings built by these young men are still standing today. The construction was that good. Next slide. Some facts. 1933 to 1942, total cost $3 billion. Allotments to dependents, families, 662 million, 3 million, almost 3.5 million men enrolled total. Number of people directly benefited from the enrollees' checks, 12 to 15 million. Money immediately into the economy. Value of the work in 1942 dollars, $2 billion. Probably today that would be about 100. I don't know what the, a lot. The average enrollee was 18 to 19 years old, 147 pounds, 5 feet, 8 1/4 inches tall. I used to be 5'8" 1/4 inches tall. Now I'm a midget. A joke. Next slide. They performed 300 possible types of work projects within 10 classifications. I don't have to read those for you. You can see the different classifications. Big were forest protection, fire prevention. They were actually, it doesn't say here, but big in fisheries. I know that's important in Sri Lanka. Flood control, erosion control. They built not just foot trails, but they built major roads that are still in service today. Next slide. They kept good statistics. Look at this. Average weight gain, 11.5 pounds. This was they taught 40,000 people how to read. Back in the 30s, we had an illiteracy problem in my country. They taught 40,000 people how to read and write. They were all over in 50 in the United States and in all of our territories except Somalia. Highest elevation of a camp, 500 camps, or 4,500 camps. Highest elevation, 9,200 feet. Lowest elevation, below sea level. Just some statistics. They taught, during the CCC experience, participants could learn very many different business skills. Here they're learning how to type. I don't know if anyone in here knows what a typewriter is. They learn how to type. They learn basic engineering, surveying, all different types of job skills that were instrumental in helping the United States during World War II. Next slide. 125,000 miles of road, 89,000 miles of telephone lines. You don't need those anymore. Everybody has a cell phone. Most of you have two. These are just a sort of a menu of what was achieved in a 10-year period. Next slide. Farmland benefited, stream and lake protection, range revegetation. It was not always safe. They lost 29 CCC members in forest fires. Mosquito control, look at that, 248,000 acres. I noticed that in Sri Lanka there's a dengue fever problem. How many in here have had dengue fever? Raise your hand. I'm the only person here that's had dengue fever? I don't believe it. You're kidding. I'm the only person here that's had dengue fever? Oh, please, one more person. There he is, right there. Trust me, you don't want it. The only good thing about dengue fever is that once you get it and you survive, you'll never get it again. And fish? Okay, next slide. Numbers, trees planted, I mean, it was quite a success. And their unofficial motto was, the CCT, we can take it. It was hard work. It was hard work. Next slide. And it was run by, oh, not all positive. Not all positive. African Americans in my country participated in the program. They were given the same pay, the same benefits, did the same hard work, but the camps were segregated. Not a proud moment in my history, my country's history. Also, they tried briefly to have women in the program and it didn't work. Probably because of the nature of the work, I'm not sure. Again, not a positive feature of the program. Next slide. What I want to emphasize is that this was a military operation, non-lethal military operation conducted over a 10-year period with very beneficial results, not just for the country, but for the participants in the program and for the United States Army. Had it not been for this program, the United States Army would not have a trained NCO Corps that was available for World War II. Now, I'm not advocating a CCC program to keep your military trained. I'm just saying that there were benefits, particularly in the United States, for this program. All right? Next slide. Some final thoughts. In my view, a national military service can have a profound effect on national unity. African Americans in my country benefited from being allowed to be in the United States Army after 1950. It was an organization that offered almost immediate equality for rank, for position, for training, for education. I'm a firm believer in the national military being the common denominator for national unity. Dealing with the youth bulge problem is not just a Sri Lankan situation. It's a worldwide, particularly in the developing world, situation that we are going to have to deal with. And it really is about the economy. I think it's more about the economy. If people are working and they can sustain their family, they are much less likely to get involved in extraneous activity. So I do believe it's about the economy. And if I could make one word of advice to this group, as far as what you do with your development dollars, is, and I'm not saying that because there's two women here, give it to women. In rural areas, even in remote areas, villages, even in cities, if you give women, small capital, small grants, they will capitalize business. They will start a productive business. They will hire people for that business, and it will prosper. We have tons of data that prove this. If you give men money, somebody say it for me. No. You know what I mean? They'll spend it. My view. All right. Next slide. I show this slide with some amount of pride. The United States has helped support Sri Lanka. This picture was taken on January 4th, 2005. On January 5th, 2005, I happened to be in the Oval Office with President Bush for a half hour of private time. And I can tell you for a fact that the tsunami and the effects of the tsunami and helping countries that were affected by the tsunami was very much on his mind. And he was very proud of the fact that the day before he gave former President Clinton and his dad, former President Bush, and he made them co-chairs of the United States tsunami relief effort. Next slide. I think I did it in just about the right time. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you.
So that was the treat for you on his birthday. Many happy returns of the day, sir. Thank you very much.